Golden Age celebrities who were secretly born female. The glittering facade of Golden Age Hollywood concealed secrets more fascinating than any screenplay. While the cameras rolled and audiences swooned, some of cinema's most intriguing figures carried private truths about their identities that studio executives worked tirelessly to conceal. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on a little-known chapter of film history, celebrities who were assigned female at birth but lived as men during their remarkable careers. Now, you won't find these names in the Hollywood Walk of Fame. These weren't your Bogarts or Hepburns, but their stories unfolded in the shadows of the studio system, behind the scenes, on the margins, or in roles never credited. And once you hear what they lived through just to exist, you'll never watch old Hollywood the same way again. The stories you're about to hear aren't sensationalized tabloid tales. They're documented accounts of courage, determination, and survival in an era when conformity wasn't just expected, it was demanded. From jazz musicians who performed for Hollywood royalty to performers who appeared alongside your favorite stars, these individuals navigated fame while carrying deeply personal truths. Have you ever wondered why certain figures from entertainment history seem to vanish without explanation, or why some performers had such extraordinary ability to transcend traditional roles? The answers might surprise you, and they'll certainly give you a new appreciation for the complexity behind Hollywood's golden veneer. Let's start with the most unbelievable secret that didn't come to light for 75 years, not even to the man's own family. Number 1. Billy Tipton, the jazz musician who fooled Hollywood. Born Dorothy Lucille Tipton in 1914 in Oklahoma City, Billy Tipton transformed from a talented female musician into a man who would become a fixture in entertainment circles that regularly intersected with Hollywood's elite. For over 50 years, Tipton lived completely as a male, performing at venues frequented by stars like Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. Tipton's journey began in the 1930s during the Great Depression. As a talented pianist and saxophonist, Dorothy initially began performing under the name Billy, simply to gain employment in jazz bands that wouldn't hire women. But what started as a professional necessity soon became a complete identity. By 1940, Tipton was living full-time as a man, binding his chest with bandages and wearing men's clothing both on and off stage. Throughout the 1940s and 50s, the Billy Tipton Trio became a popular act in the nightclub circuit, particularly in Hollywood and Las Vegas. These weren't just any clubs. These were the sophisticated night spots where film executives scouted talent and stars unwound after long days on set. The Mocambo, the Trocadero, Kairos, venues where the biggest names in Hollywood gathered to see and be seen. Tipton performed at them all, sharing billing with major entertainers of the era. What makes Tipton's story truly remarkable isn't just his musical talent, it's that his secret remained intact throughout his life. He married several women and even adopted 3 sons with his last wife, Kitty. None of them, not his wives, not his children, knew about his assigned birth sex until after his death in 1989, when paramedics discovered the truth while attempting to save his life. His son William later told reporters, "He'll always be dad to me." But let's not pretend this double life came without struggle. Tipton bound his chest so tightly that it caused chronic pain and permanent tissue damage. He avoided doctors at all costs, even refusing medical treatment for a bleeding ulcer that eventually contributed to his death. During one notable performance at the Flamingo in Las Vegas in 1954, he reportedly refused to change costumes in the communal dressing room, claiming religious convictions. These necessary precautions likely contributed to the health issues that eventually claimed his life. What's particularly fascinating is that several film producers, including one associated with Warner Brothers, had approached Tipton about biographical projects in the early 1960s, completely unaware of his secret. He turned down these potentially lucrative opportunities, knowing they would require medical examinations for insurance purposes. He chose to protect his identity over fame and fortune, a decision that ultimately left him in financial difficulty at the end of his life. When he died in Spokane, Washington, in 1989, he was living in near poverty, having withdrawn from the music scene rather than risk exposure. The revelation of Tipton's biological sex made international headlines after his death, stunning the music world and the many Hollywood figures who had seen him perform over the decades. As jazz critic Gary Giddens noted, Tipton's life raises questions about the nature of identity that go far beyond music. Indeed, his story forces us to reconsider much of what we think we know about gender in mid-century America. He played for clubs frequented by Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall, though they never knew the full story. In fact, according to one account, Bogart once tipped Tipton $100 after a particularly impressive set at the Macambo, telling him, "You play like you've lived it, pal." Number 2, Wilmer Little Axe Broadnax, the voice behind Hollywood's gospel soundtracks. If you've watched classic films featuring church scenes or Southern life, you've likely heard the powerful tenor voice of Wilmer Little Axe Broadnax. Born female in 1916 in Houston, Texas, Broadnax lived his entire adult life as a man, becoming a respected figure in gospel quartets, whose recordings frequently appeared in Hollywood productions of the 1940s through 1970s. Broadnax's extraordinary vocal abilities emerged early in life, singing in church choirs as a child. By the late 1930s, he had moved north and begun performing professionally, as a man, with various gospels. His first significant break came when he joined the Spirit of Memphis Quartet in 1940, where his tenor voice immediately set him apart. Standing just 5 feet tall, hence the nickname Little Axe, Broadnax commanded enormous respect in music circles despite his small stature. During the 1940s and 50s, as Hollywood began incorporating more authentic gospel music into films depicting African American life or Southern church scenes, Broadnax's recordings became valuable commodities. The powerful, emotion-filled tenor voice heard in the background of films like Carmen Jones, 1954, The Defiant Ones, 1958, and later Sounder, 1972, often belonged to Broadnax and his groups. Music supervisors for these productions specifically sought out his recordings for their authenticity and emotional impact. By the 1950s, Broadnax had formed his own group, the Little Axe and the Golden Echoes, which recorded numerous tracks that found their way into film and television productions. He later joined the Five Blind Boys of Mississippi, one of the most influential gospel groups of the era, further cementing his place in music history. Throughout this time, his biological sex remained his closely guarded secret. What's particularly remarkable about Broadnax's story is how completely he was accepted in the male-dominated gospel community. He shared dressing rooms, tour buses, and close quarters with fellow performers for decades. None suspected his secret. His powerful voice and commanding stage presence apparently overcame any questions about his sometimes unusual behaviors, such as his insistence on private changing areas or separate sleeping arrangements while touring. Broadnax's secret remained intact until his tragic death in 1992. After being stabbed during a domestic dispute in Philadelphia, hospital staff discovered his biological sex during emergency treatment. The news stunned the entertainment world, including many Hollywood figures who had worked with him or featured his music in their productions. Gospel historian Anthony Heilbutt later commented, "Little Axe was one of the most respected figures in gospel. No one had the slightest idea." The revelation prompted a reevaluation of Broadnax's legacy, with music historians noting how his tenor voice, unusually high and pure even for a male tenor, had contributed to the distinctive sound of mid-century gospel music. That sound became an essential element in Hollywood's portrayal of African American church life and spirituality during the studio era. Some of his gospel tracks were licensed by studios for films starring Sidney Poitier, including background music for church scenes in Lilies of the Field. Poitier himself was reportedly a fan of Broadnax's singing, though like everyone else in Hollywood, he had no knowledge of Broadnax's biological history. Number 3, Sir Lady Java, the entertainer who challenged Hollywood's rules. While not strictly from the Golden Age, no discussion of this topic would be complete without mentioning Sir Lady Java, who began performing in the late 1960s and encountered many stars from Hollywood's golden era. Born female in New Orleans in the 1940s, Java became a celebrated entertainer in Los Angeles nightclubs, frequented by Hollywood royalty. What makes Java's story unique is that, unlike others on our list who lived in secrecy, Java fought publicly against discrimination. In the late 1960s, Los Angeles had a law known as Rule Number 9, which prohibited people from dressing in clothes of the opposite sex with the intent to deceive. This ordinance was frequently used to harass and arrest transgender performers and drag entertainers. Java began performing at the Red Fox Club in Los Angeles in 1967. Her shows were sophisticated, glamorous affairs that attracted celebrities, including Sammy Davis Jr., Richard Pryor, and many aging stars from the studio era looking for edgier entertainment. Her performances were renowned for their elegance and artistry, combining dance, comedy, and striking visual presentations. In 1967, the Los Angeles Police Department began targeting Java's performances, threatening to arrest the club owner under Rule Number 9 if he continued to feature her act. Rather than accepting this discrimination, Java made a historic decision. She would fight back. With the help of the ACLU, she challenged the constitutionality of Rule Number 9, arguing that it violated her right to free expression. Her legal battle attracted support from several aging Hollywood stars who recognized her extraordinary talent and believed in her right to perform. Though she ultimately lost her case on technical grounds, the court ruled she didn't have standing to sue since it was the club owner who was being threatened with legal action, not Java herself. Her courage paved the way for later legal victories. The publicity surrounding her case highlighted the discriminatory nature of laws targeting gender non-conforming individuals. What's particularly noteworthy about Java's story is how she created a bridge between different eras in Hollywood. Many of the Golden Age stars who supported her were from a generation that had lived under the strict moral codes of the studio system, yet they recognized her talent and supported her fight for dignity. As Java herself said in a rare interview, some of those old Hollywood types understood what it meant to have to hide who you really are. They lived under the studio system, which controlled everything about them. She performed in LA nightclubs where aging Golden Age stars like Mae West and Marlene Dietrich were regulars. According to several accounts, Dietrich, known for her own gender-bending performances in films like Morocco, was particularly supportive of Java, once telling her, "My dear, we are the same spirit, just born in different times." So far, we've seen just how far people had to go to survive in a system that erased their truth. But the next story, it's the one that still has historians arguing today, and it all started with a letter found decades after death. Number 4, Mountain Charlie, the frontier figure who inspired Western films. While not directly a Hollywood figure, Mountain Charlie, born Charlotte Darky Parkhurst in 1812, became the inspiration for numerous Western films during Hollywood's golden age. Living completely as a man from the 1850s until death in 1879, Charlie was a stagecoach driver whose extraordinary life story inspired at least 3 classic Westerns during the 1940s and 50s. Born in New Hampshire, Charlie ran away from an orphanage as a youth, began dressing as a boy, and eventually found work in stables where he learned to handle horses. By the 1850s, Charlie had made his way to California during the gold rush and established a reputation as one of the finest stagecoach drivers in the West, a profession that was exclusively male and notoriously dangerous. Standing just 5 feet 6 inches and slight of build, Charlie nevertheless handled 6-horse teams with exceptional skill, navigating treacherous mountain roads and fending off bandits. After losing the use of one eye and a kick from a horse, Charlie wore an eye patch, adding to his distinctive appearance and later making him an even more compelling character for Hollywood adaptations. What makes Charlie's story particularly noteworthy is that he not only lived as a man, but became the first female-born person to vote in a presidential election for Ulysses S. Grant in 1868, long before women's suffrage. When Hollywood discovered this historical figure in the 1940s, several loosely based characters appeared in Western films, though always portrayed by male actors. After Charlie's death from tongue cancer in 1879, the coroner discovered his birth sex, shocking the California community, where he was known as a tough, one-eyed stagecoach driver with a reputation for handling the most dangerous routes. The San Francisco Morning Call published an obituary titled 30 Years in Disguise, A Noted Character Passes Away, revealing Charlie's secret to a stunned public. During Hollywood's Western boom in the 1940s and 50s, Charlie's story captured the imagination of several filmmakers. The character of One-Eyed Charlie in the 1949 film Highway 13 was directly inspired by Parkhurst. Elements of Charlie's life also appeared in The Stage to Tucson, 1951, and The Quicksilver Trail, 1954. Though studio executives typically watered down the gender aspects of the story, creating male characters inspired by Charlie rather than telling his true story. What's fascinating is how Hollywood simultaneously exploited and erased Charlie's real story. Studio research departments were well aware of the historical details. In fact, a memo discovered in the MGM archives from 1947 specifically discusses Parkhurst's biological sex and suggests adapting the more commercial elements while avoiding potentially controversial aspects. This sanitization reflects the strict moral codes governing film content during the era. John Ford's stagecoach characters were partially influenced by Charlie's legend, though Ford never publicly acknowledged the connection. Film historian Ron Bergman noted that Ford kept a book about frontier stage drivers in his personal library that contained a detailed account of Parkhurst's life and secret identity. Number 5. Dr. Alan L. Hart, the medical pioneer who consulted on Hollywood films. Born Alberta Lucille Hart in 1890 in Kansas, Dr. Alan Hart became one of the first female-to-male transgender individuals to undergo a hysterectomy in the United States. After transitioning in 1917 with the support of psychiatrist J. Allen Gilbert at the University of Oregon, he established himself as a respected radiologist and occasionally consulted on medical accuracy for Hollywood films in the 1930s and 40s. Hart's journey was remarkable even before his Hollywood connections. After graduating as the only female in his medical school class at the University of Oregon in 1917, Hart consulted with Dr. Gilbert about his lifelong feeling that he was male. Gilbert was surprisingly supportive for the era, helping Hart through his transition and documenting the case, with Hart's permission, in medical literature that, while problematic by modern standards, was groundbreaking for its time. After his transition, Hart built a distinguished medical career, becoming a leading expert in tuberculosis detection and treatment. His innovations in using X-ray technology for early TB screening saved countless lives. During the 1930s, as Hollywood began producing more realistic medical dramas, Hart's expertise made him a valuable resource for technical accuracy. Dr. Hart's medical knowledge was particularly sought after for films dealing with tuberculosis, a disease that featured prominently in many Golden Age melodramas. While working primarily as a consultant behind the scenes, he helped ensure accuracy in films like Dark Victory, 1939, and later medical-themed productions. Few in Hollywood knew about his history, as he lived completely as a man after his transition, moving frequently to avoid discovery of his past. What's particularly fascinating about Dr. Hart is that he navigated both the medical establishment and Hollywood's technical advisors circle without detection. In addition to his medical work, he published numerous scientific papers, 4 novels, and eventually consulted on public health films. His novels, written under his male name, often explored themes of individuals caught between societal expectations, a subtle reflection of his own experiences. Hart's 1935 novel Dr. Mallory featured a protagonist struggling against conventional thinking in medicine, a theme that resonated with several Hollywood producers looking for medical drama material. While the novel wasn't directly adapted, elements of its plot influenced later medical films, with Hart serving as an uncredited consultant to ensure technical accuracy. By the 1940s, Hart had become the director of radiology at a sanatorium in Connecticut and continued his research while maintaining ties to Hollywood's medical consultants. His work helped shape how tuberculosis and other respiratory diseases were portrayed on screen during an era when these illnesses featured prominently in film narratives. Hart's life ended in 1962, with his transgender status still known only to his wife Edna and a few close associates. His obituaries celebrated his medical contributions with no mention of his transition. It wasn't until decades later that historians began to recognize Dr. Hart as a pioneer not just in medicine, but in transgender history. He provided technical consulting for films starring Lionel Barrymore, who often played doctors in MGM productions. Barrymore, who suffered from arthritis and other health problems, reportedly developed a professional friendship with Hart, completely unaware of his transgender status. Number 6. Jack B. Garland, the journalist who documented Hollywood's early days. Born Elvira Virginia Mugarieta in 1869 in San Francisco to a Mexican consul father and American mother, Jack B. Garland lived as a man from young adulthood until death in 1936. As a journalist, his coverage occasionally included the emerging film industry in California, providing a unique perspective on Hollywood's formative years. Garland's journey to his male identity began early. By age 15, he had begun dressing as a boy, calling himself Babe Bean. In his 20s, after a brief and unhappy marriage, he adopted male clothing permanently and crafted a new identity. What makes Garland's story remarkable is the extraordinary lengths he went to in order to live authentically, including enlisting during the Spanish-American War, where he served as a cabin boy on a troop transport, living among the homeless to report on their conditions, and working in various traditionally male occupations. By the early 1900s, Garland had established himself as a journalist using the name Jack B. Garland, writing for San Francisco newspapers about social issues. As the film industry began taking shape in Southern California around 1910, Garland's journalistic beat occasionally brought him into contact with the emerging studios and their productions. Garland's most significant connection to early Hollywood came through his series of articles titled The Moving Picture Men, published in the San Francisco Examiner between 1915 and 1917. These pieces documented the transition from the old traveling film shows to the establishment of permanent studios in Southern California. His outsider perspective gave him unique insights into the artificial nature of the star system being created. What makes Garland's observations particularly valuable is how his own experience living outside gender norms informed his understanding of Hollywood's carefully constructed personas. In one remarkably prescient article from 1916, he wrote, "These moving picture companies are creating not just films, but entirely new people. The actors cease to be themselves and become what the public demands, wearing masks both on and off the screen." As Hollywood matured into the studio system of the 1920s, Garland's journalism increasingly focused on social justice issues, particularly advocating for homeless men and war veterans. His experience living as a transgender man in early 20th century America gave him unusual empathy for other marginalized groups. Garland died in 1936 of a bronchial infection, his biological sex discovered only after death. His funeral was attended by numerous homeless men he had advocated for, but few from his journalistic circles. His writings about early Hollywood remained largely forgotten until film historians in the 1970s rediscovered his work, recognizing its unique perspective on the industry's formative years. His reporting on early film sets was read by Charlie Chaplin, who once quoted Garland's observations on the artifice of celebrity. In a 1917 interview, Chaplin referenced a perceptive writer named Garland when discussing how studios manufactured star personas, completely unaware of Garland's own carefully constructed identity. The stories of these remarkable individuals reveal a hidden dimension to entertainment history that challenges our understanding of Golden Age Hollywood. These weren't isolated cases. They represent a pattern of gender nonconformity that has existed throughout history, but was particularly suppressed during Hollywood's formative years. What's especially striking is how the rigid studio system of the Golden Age, with its morality clauses and carefully cultivated star images, created an environment where authenticity was nearly impossible. The Hays Code, which governed film content from 1934 to 1968, prohibited even the suggestion of sexual perversion on screen, terminology that at the time included any gender nonconformity. This meant that while these individuals lived their truth privately, the characters they inspired or portrayed on screen could never reflect their reality. Consider the profound irony. Hollywood was built on the idea of transformation, of becoming someone else on screen, yet it simultaneously enforced rigid conformity in the private lives of those associated with it. Studio contracts in the Golden Age contained morality clauses that gave studios the right to terminate anyone whose personal behavior might damage the studio's reputation. For someone living as a gender different from their birth assignment, discovery didn't just mean career suicide. It could mean criminal prosecution under various masquerading laws that existed throughout much of the 20th century. The pressure must have been immense. Imagine achieving success, even fame, while constantly guarding against discovery. Each public appearance, each interview, each casual interaction carried the risk of exposure that could end not just a career, but potentially lead to legal consequences in an era when cross-dressing was often criminalized. Medical examinations for insurance purposes, communal dressing rooms, shared accommodations while touring, everyday aspects of entertainment work became potential traps. This explains why many of these figures operated at the periphery of Hollywood rather than at its center. The scrutiny faced by major stars was simply too intense, the risks too great. Instead, they found niches where they could practice their arts with slightly less visibility, as musicians in nightclubs, as technical consultants, as journalists covering the industry. Even in these adjacent roles, they lived with constant vigilance and sacrifice. Despite these extraordinary challenges, these pioneers created lasting legacies that extended beyond their lifetimes. Their stories remind us that Hollywood's history is far more diverse and complex than what appeared on screen during its golden age. What's particularly poignant is that many of these individuals never lived to see a time when their stories could be told openly and celebrated. They navigated a world that wasn't ready to acknowledge their existence, yet they persevered, creating art and touching lives while staying true to themselves in whatever ways they could. For modern viewers looking back at Golden Age cinema, these stories add a fascinating dimension to our understanding of the era. They help us recognize the genuine courage behind certain performances that subtly challenged gender norms, and they invite us to consider what other stories remain to be discovered in Hollywood's rich history. The studio system that once worked so diligently to erase these narratives has itself faded into history. What remains are the films, the music, the writings, and increasingly, the true stories of those who created them. As film historian Vito Russo once observed, the most important story Hollywood ever told may be the one it tried hardest not to tell. As we rediscover these hidden figures from entertainment history, we're not just filling gaps in our understanding, we're recognizing the full humanity of those who contributed to our cultural heritage while being denied the right to exist openly as themselves. They weren't allowed to be stars or even fully themselves, but somehow, through sheer talent and determination, they left fingerprints on an industry that never wanted to claim them. We say we love Golden Age Hollywood. Maybe it's time we also learn who it left behind. If you've enjoyed this exploration of Hollywood's lesser-known history, don't forget to hit that like button to help others discover these fascinating stories. Subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the golden age of cinema, the era when stars weren't just famous, they were legendary. What other aspects of classic Hollywood would you like us to explore? Drop a comment below with your suggestions, perhaps the secret political affiliations of major stars, or the true stories behind Hollywood's most famous feuds. Let us know what intrigues you about cinema's most glamorous era. And thank you for joining us on this journey through Hollywood's hidden history. Until next time, keep the classic flame burning bright. Some believe there may have been on-screen stars living similar truths, stories buried even deeper by the studios, but that's a story for another time.